A hot wind moves across West Texas. A wagon cuts through the dust. The road is rough, the sun is hard, and the world feels empty for miles. On this road, in 1887, a man rides who has spent his whole life surviving danger. His name is Clay Allison. Some people call him a Wild West gunfighter. Some call him a cattle rancher. Some call him a violent man. And some say he was both, depending on the day, depending on the town, depending on who was telling the story. But what makes Clay Allison so famous is not only what he did, it is how his story ends. He does not fall in a dramatic shootout. He does not die in a famous duel at high noon. Instead, Clay Allison is thrown from a wagon in a sudden jolt, and the wagon wheel runs over him. In seconds, a man who lived through war and frontier violence is gone, crushed by the everyday thing he trusted to carry him home. That is the first shock of his biography. The second shock is this. Before the West turned him into a legend, he was just a boy from Tennessee. Clay Allison was born in Waynesboro, Tennessee, in the early 1840s. He grew up in a world of farms, hard work, and strict rules. Life was not easy, but it was clear. There were stories that Clay had a childhood head injury. Later, during the Civil War, military doctors described him as emotionally unstable. In simple terms, it meant this: he could be calm one moment, and then suddenly become intense and unpredictable. Then the Civil War arrived, and it changed everything. It gave Clay a place to aim his energy. It gave him weapons. It gave him chaos. And it gave him a new way to measure life, by fear, by survival, and by how quickly a man could be gone. Clay joined the Confederate Army. For a time, the war pushed him forward like a storm pushes a broken tree. But the war also exposed what was already inside him. He was discharged early for emotional instability. Most men would have gone home and stayed there. Clay did not. A few months later, he re-enlisted as a cavalryman. He rode with the 19th Tennessee Cavalry, and later his unit served under General Nathan Bedford Forrest near the end of the war. This mattered, because cavalry life was different from foot soldiers. Cavalry meant long rides, sudden violence, and quick decisions. It meant living on the edge of sleep, hunger, and danger. It meant you learned to read the land, read a man's face, and react before the other man moved. Clay was learning skills that would follow him into the Wild West, skills that could make him rich, or make him feared, or make him both at the same time. When the war ended, America tried to heal, but many men did not. A lot of soldiers returned home with anger, with nightmares, with the feeling that peace was too quiet and too small. Clay Allison was one of those men who did not fit back into normal life, so he went west. He left Tennessee behind and entered the wide-open world of Texas cattle country. Out there, a man could reinvent himself. He could take a new job, a new name, and a new reputation. And reputation was everything. In frontier towns, there were no social media posts, no official records that mattered to regular people. There was only talk. There were stories. There were whispers at saloons and trading posts. If people believed a man was dangerous, he became dangerous. If people believed a man was brave, he became brave. Clay Allison understood that world, and the world understood him. He worked around cattle and ranch life. He rode with cowhands, who measured respect in a simple way. Can you do the job? Can you hold your ground? Will you break when pressure comes? Clay did not break easily, but he also did not always stay steady. There were stories of him drinking, stories of him turning wild, stories that made men laugh nervously, because the same story could end as a joke, or end as a warning. And slowly, Clay's name began to change. He was no longer just another man on horseback. He was becoming a figure people talked about. When the night got quiet, music rises. Slightly. This is how legends begin. Not with a big moment, but with a pattern. A man shows up, trouble follows. People remember. Then trouble follows again. People remember more soon. His name becomes a headline in someone's mind before he even walks through the door, and Clay Allison's name started to carry weight. The kind of weight that made some men step aside, the kind of weight that made others want to test him, because in the Wild West, there was always someone trying to prove something, Always someone who wanted to be the next feared man in the next town. Always someone who believed that if they could defeat a known fighter, they could steal his reputation like a trophy. Clay Allison did not simply move west to find land. He moved west, into a world where conflict was normal, and that world was about to place him in the kind of setting that creates true stories people never forget, a place where money, power, and violence all mix together, a place called New Mexico Territory. And when Clay arrives there, his life stops being a veteran trying to start over. It becomes something else. It becomes the beginning of the Clay Allison people still argue about today. Was he a ruthless killer? Was he a rough kind of justice in a rough land? Or was he a man who could never escape the storm inside him? That question starts in New Mexico. When Clay Allison rides into New Mexico territory, the land feels different from Tennessee and Texas. The sky looks wider. The towns feel smaller. The rules feel weaker. In places like this, the law is not always a strong wall. Sometimes it is only a thin line drawn in dust. And Clay Allison is the kind of man who has spent his life stepping over lines. He comes as a working cowboy at first. He is not famous yet, not like he will be later, but he is already known as a man with a sharp temper and a hard stare. He has the look of someone who has seen too much, and the posture of someone who expects trouble to find him. New Mexico in the early 1870s is not peaceful. It is hungry. It is growing. It is full of men who want land, money, and control. And in a place like that, a man like Clay does not just live in the story. He becomes part of it. Clay begins working cattle operations and driving herds. He earns money. He earns a place. Then he does what many frontier men dream of doing. He tries to build something that is his. He settles near Cimarron in Colfax County and starts ranching. He works hard and becomes successful. People later say he grew a solid operation: cattle, horses, land, and pride. For a moment, it looks like he might become only a rancher, a rough man. Yes, but still, a man building a future. Yet, the West does not let a person choose only one identity. Not when the ground itself is contested. Not when powerful men treat towns like property. Because Colfax County is not only ranch land, it is a battlefield with no official uniforms. It is a place where business and politics are tied together like rope. If someone pulls one end, the other end tightens around someone's neck. People call this time the Colfax County War era. To outsiders, it can sound like a single war, but to those living inside it, it feels like many small wars at once. A land fight, a money fight, a power fight, a who runs this town fight. And when conflicts stack up like that, men begin to pick sides, sometimes by choice, sometimes by force. Clay Allison is not a politician, but he is also not a man who stays neutral when he feels insulted or threatened. And that is how he gets pulled in Cimarron and the nearby towns. People begin to notice Clay more. He is not the loudest man in every room, but when he is angry, everyone notices. When he drinks, he changes. When he feels cornered, he becomes dangerous. And the West is full of corners. Clay also has something many men want: a growing ranch, cattle, and the strength to defend what is his. That kind of success attracts attention, and attention attracts trouble. Soon, Clay's name starts showing up in stories, told around saloon tables and ranch fires. Not polite stories, not soft stories, stories with warnings in them. Stories that end with someone saying, "Don't push that man." But it is important to understand something. Clay Allison does not become famous only because he fights. He becomes famous because he lives in a place where violence is part of daily life, and because people feel unsure about what he might do next. That uncertainty is powerful. Fear is powerful. And Clay is becoming a man people fear. New Mexico is also a place where community justice often moves faster than official justice. If a crime happens, some towns do not wait for courts. They gather men. They make a decision. They act to modernize. It looks cruel and wrong. To some people at the time, it looks like survival. This is the world Clay is living in now. A world where right and wrong get blurred by grief and anger. A world where punishment can happen before truth is fully known. And Clay Allison, with his strong opinions and violent edge, fits into that world in a way that makes him both useful and dangerous. As the years move forward, the pressure in Colfax County grows. Men argue over land titles, men argue over cattle claims, men argue over who has authority. In towns like Cimarron, even a small insult can lead to a big fight. A glance can turn into a challenge. A rumor can turn into revenge. And Clay is surrounded by rumors. Some say he is brave, some say he is unstable, some say he is a man who can be friendly 1 hour and terrifying the next. Even people who respect him do not always relax around him. They watch him closely, the way people watch a storm cloud. Because storms do not ask permission, they arrive. There is another truth about the Old West. Legends often grow from a mix of real events and repeated retelling. Details shift, names get sharper, the story becomes cleaner than real life. And Clay Allison's legend starts forming in this exact way. People begin adding titles to his name. Some call him a gunfighter, some call him a maniac, some call him a protector, some call him a problem. The same man, described in opposite ways. That is how you know a person has entered the territory of myth. Clay tries to live as a rancher, but trouble keeps circling back. And in this region, there are two types of men: men who avoid conflict, and men who walk into it. Clay is the second type. He does not always start the problem, but he does not step away from it. Either when he thinks someone is disrespecting him, he reacts. When he thinks someone is threatening his place, he hardens. And in a land full of armed men, hard reactions become permanent. Then comes the moment when the tension stops building and starts breaking. A preacher is killed. Suspicion spreads fast. People want an answer, and they want it now. They stop trusting slow law, they start trusting quick punishment. And Clay Allison is drawing close to the center of it, because in the Old West, when a mob forms, it does not ask calm men to lead the way. It looks for men who are already known for being hard. Known for being willing. Known for not blinking. Clay's life is now moving toward a night that will stain his story forever. A night that will raise a question. People still argue about, was Clay Allison delivering frontier justice or feeding frontier cruelty? That question will not stay theoretical for long. By the time Clay Allison becomes known in Colfax County, people do not speak his name casually. They speak it like a warning, not because he is the only violent man in New Mexico territory, but because he is one of the few men who seems unpredictable. One day he can be calm, working cattle, talking like any other rancher. The next day he can turn hard and dangerous, like a door slamming shut. And in a land where almost everyone carries a gun, that kind of mood can get someone killed. The year is 1875. Tension in the region is already high. There are grudges, political rivalries, land disputes, and a long list of men who believe the law belongs to whoever is strongest. Then a terrible thing happens. A Methodist circuit rider, a traveling preacher named Reverend F.J. Tolby, is killed. The news spreads fast, because on the frontier, a preacher is more than a preacher. He is a symbol of order, a symbol of morality, a reminder that some people still believe in rules. So when Tolby is murdered, people do not just feel angry. They feel offended, they feel attacked, and when fear mixes with anger, towns can become dangerous overnight. Suspicion falls on a man named Cruz Vega. Some people believe Vega is guilty. Others are not sure. But the key detail is this: the town does not want a slow trial, they want a quick ending. Because frontier communities often believe that waiting means losing control, and losing control means more death. So a mob forms. Men gather in the dark, not as deputies, not as judges, but as neighbors who have decided they will become the law for one night. It is a turning point moment. The kind of moment that changes a town's soul, and Clay Allison is close to it. Some accounts claim he was part of the group that seized Cruz Vega and lynched him. Whether every detail is perfectly recorded or not, the larger truth remains clear. This was the frontier at its harshest, and Clay Allison's name becomes tied to that harshness. After that night, something shifts. A line gets crossed. And once a line is crossed, crossing it again becomes easier. In the days that follow, the air in Cimarron feels heavy. People look at each other differently. Men watch who is armed. Women listen for raised voices. Every argument feels like it could explode. And in the middle of it all stands Clay Allison, already known, already watched, already feared. Then comes another incident that will cling to Clay's reputation like dust too. Boots. It happens at a place with a name that sounds almost harmless. The St. James Hotel in Cimarron. But there is nothing harmless about a frontier hotel at night. Hotel is where strangers meet, where rumors travel, where pride gets tested, and where trouble can begin. With a single word. In those days, men do not just fight with fists. They fight with reputations. They fight with threats. They fight with guns. Clay Allison gets into a confrontation with a man named Pancho. Grego. Accounts differ in the small details: who said what first, who reached first, who truly started it. But the ending is the same. Clay Allison shoots and kills Pancho Grego on the frontier. One killing can follow a man forever. It becomes a story people repeat. It becomes a reason others fear him. It becomes a reason some men want to challenge him. And for Clay Allison, it becomes a stamp on his name. Now, he is not just that rancher with a temper. He is a man who has killed, man who will kill again if pushed, and even worse, some people start to believe he might not need much pushing. This is where Clay's legend begins to harden. Because the Old West does not build legends out of quiet men. It builds legends out of men who carry danger with them. Soon, people start linking Clay Allison with a kind of Wild West reputation that can ruin a person's chance at peace. Once you become known as a gunfighter, the world treats you like one, even if you try to stop, even if you want to settle down, even if you want to be normal. The West does not care what you want. The West cares what people think you are. After the killing, Clay's behavior becomes part of what people talk about. There are stories, some confirm, some exaggerated, that he drank heavily and acted wild. There are stories of him showing off, provoking people, or going too far. In towns like Cimarron, a man's behavior becomes a public matter, not because people love gossip, because gossip is how they survive. If a man is dangerous, everyone wants to know so they can avoid him, or prepare for him, or recruit him, or trap him. And Clay Allison becomes more than a person. He becomes a symbol of the frontier itself, a place where justice can be fast and brutal. Where power is measured in courage and violence, where a man's worst day can become his permanent identity. But Clay is not only a killer in the stories, he is also a man trying to live. He works his ranch, he handles cattle, he builds his future, and for a moment, it seems like he might still grow into something stable. Then, he meets the kind of man who changes everything. A man with his own violent reputation. A man known for killing and surviving. A man named Chunk Colbert. This is the moment the story tightens. Because when two feared men cross paths, the town holds its breath, not because they want violence, because they expect it. And on the frontier, expectations can pull the trigger before anyone else does. The room feels calm at first. A table, a meal, the kind of normal moment that would mean nothing in another place. But this is the Old West. And in the Old West, normal moments can turn deadly without warning. Clay Allison sits down to eat. He does not walk in acting like a legend. He does not announce himself. He does not look for applause. He sits like a man who has worked hard and wants food. But people in the room are watching him. Anyway, because Clay already has a reputation. And in frontier towns, reputation enters the room before the man does. Then another man appears. A man with his own dark name. A man people fear for different reasons. His name is Chunk Colbert. Some say Colbert is a professional killer. Some say he is a gambler, a drifter, a man who lives by the gun. Many stories claim he has already killed several men and walks like he expects to kill more. And when he steps into the same space as Clay Allison, it feels like the air changes. The room goes quieter, voices drop. Eyes move quickly, table to door, door to hands, hands to holsters, because the people there understand something simple. When two dangerous men meet, the town might pay the price. Colbert sits nearby. Maybe he recognizes Clay, maybe he has heard the stories, or maybe he simply sees Clay as the next challenge. In the Old West, some men do not want peace. They want the next story to be about them. They want the next town to whisper their name. And one fast way to become famous is to beat a man who is already feared. Colbert's eyes settle on Clay. He speaks in a way that feels like testing a knife's edge. He provokes, he pushes. He tries to make Clay react, because if Clay stands up angry, Colbert can say, he started it. And if Clay stays calm, Colbert can push harder at it. Is a trap made of words? Clay listens. He keeps eating. And that is the first surprise. He does not explode. He does not shout. He does not brag. He stays still like a man who has been in storms before and refuses to dance for thunder. But inside the room, fear grows. People are thinking, is this going to happen right here? A gunfight at a dinner table. Two men, so close they can hear each other breathe. Clay's hand stays near his food. Colbert's hand stays near his weapon. And for a long moment, the whole room is waiting for a single movement. Now, there is an important truth about this story. This dinner table showdown is one of the most repeated Clay Allison stories of all time. But like many Old West stories, details can change depending on who tells it. Some versions say it happened in an inn. Some say it happened in a hotel dining room. Some say it happened at a table with other men nearby. Some claim Colbert tried to draw first. Not every detail can be proven with perfect certainty. But the reason the story survives is simple. It captures what people believed about Clay Allison. That when danger sat across from him, he did not panic, he did not hesitate, and he did not lose. Colbert makes his move. Maybe his hand drops toward his gun, maybe his shoulder shifts, maybe his eyes give it away. Whatever the exact moment is, Clay reads it faster than the room can understand. Clay's chair moves back just enough. His hand moves with the speed of a man who has done this before, and then the room freezes in the silence that follows. People see the result. Chunk, Colbert is down. The man who walked in like a threat is now still and bleeding on the floor. Clay Allison is standing, breathing hard, his face tight, his eyes locked on what he just did. For a second, nobody moves, because the West teaches people to respect the moment after gunfire. That moment is where the next shot can happen. Then the room comes back to life. Chairs scrape. Someone whispers. Someone rushes toward door, and somewhere in the noise, a truth forms instantly. Clay Allison is not just a man with a temper. He is a man who can defeat another feared gunman and walk away. In frontier towns, that kind of moment is like lightning. It is bright. It is terrifying. It is unforgettable. And it spreads by the next day. The story is on the street by the next week. It is on the trail by the next month. It is being told in towns Clay has never visited. And every time it is told, the legend grows. But here is the hidden cost. When a man wins a moment like this, he wins fear, and fear is not the same as respect. Fear does not make life easier. Fear makes life dangerous in a different way, because fear attracts two kinds of people, the ones who want to avoid you and the ones who want to prove they are not scared. The second kind is the problem. Those are the men who come looking for you. Those are the men who want to test you. Those are the men who believe your name can become their ladder. And Clay Allison's name is now a ladder. Clay goes back to ranching, back to routine, back to the work that keeps a man alive. But he cannot go back to being unknown. Not after a story like this. Not after people start using his name as a warning. Not after whispers turn into certainty. Now, every argument feels sharper. Every saloon feels smaller. Every stranger feels like a question. And in Clay's own mind, something changes to because a man can only live with violence so long before it begins living inside him. He begins to understand that the West is not only a place of freedom, it is also a place where your past follows you like hoofprints in dust. You can ride away from a town, but you cannot ride away from a reputation. Soon, Clay's story pulls toward a bigger stage, a place where lawmen try to control a wild town, a place where famous names already exist, a place where a dangerous reputation can either get you killed or get you disarmed and humiliated, a place called Dodge City. And the next part is where the myth becomes louder than the man, because the story of Clay Allison is about to collide with one of the most famous lawmen legends of all time. Dodge City is not like Cimarron. Dodge City is loud, it is crowded, it is full of money, cattle, gamblers, and strangers who do not know each other's stories yet. In a town like this, a name can become famous in one night, or a man can become dead in 1 second. And when Clay Allison rides toward Dodge City, he is not just riding into another frontier stop. He is riding into a place that is trying to control the Wild West by force, by rules, and by men with badges. Clay is already known by this time. People have heard stories about his temper. They have heard stories about fights and gunfire. They have heard stories that say he is dangerous, unpredictable, and hard to intimidate. And in the West, when people hear enough stories, they start acting like the stories are truth. That is what makes a reputation so powerful and so risky. Because the moment Clay arrives, the town begins watching him. Not just the gamblers, not just the cowboys, but the lawmen. Dodge City has a rule that matters more than most. In town, a man is not supposed to carry his guns openly. A gun may be normal out on the trail, but inside this town, it is treated like a spark near dry wood. One spark can burn down everything. Clay does not come alone. He is with other men, and they are not soft-looking men. They look like riders who have lived outside the law more than inside it. They look like men who do not like being told what to do, and that is where the conflict starts. Because Dodge City is built on one promise. It is wild, but it is not out of control. And the lawmen in this place want to prove that promise is real. At first, the day feels normal. People stare. People whisper. Clay and his men move through town like a storm cloud, moving slowly across a flat sky, not yet striking, but making everyone uneasy. Then the warnings come. A lawman approaches, calm but firm. He tells Clay the rule. He tells him to give up his guns, at least while he is inside town. This is the moment where many stories split in different directions. Some later versions claim famous lawmen faced Clay directly. Other versions say it was a group effort, with multiple officers and local figures involved. The biggest truth is simple. Dodge City does not want to fight Clay, but Dodge City is willing to. And Clay now has to decide who he is in this moment. Is he a man who obeys the rule, or is he a man who proves his pride is stronger than any badge? Clay does not like being challenged. He does not like being ordered. He has spent years surviving by showing strength first in his world. When someone pushes, you push back harder. But this is not Cimarron. This is not a quiet town where fear alone controls the street. This is a place where the law is organized, a place where the people with badges have backup, a place where a gunfight could turn into a slaughter. And Clay can feel it. He can feel the balance of power is different. Here, the standoff grows. Word spreads fast, like fire in dry grass. Men gather at a distance, pretending they are only passing by, but really watching. Saloon doors swing, windows fill with faces. Uptown holds its breath, because everyone wants to know the same thing. Will Clay Allison test Dodge City? And will Dodge City break? Clay's men stand close, hands near their weapons. The lawmen stand their ground, not loud, not panicked, but ready. The air feels thick, like the moment before a storm finally hits. This is where Clay's reputation meets something stronger than reputation, that it meets a system. It meets a town that has decided it will not be ruled by fear. And for Clay, this is not just about guns. It is about identity. Because if he gives up his weapons, some people will say he was tamed. If he refuses, he might have to shoot his way out. And if he shoots his way out, he might not make it out at all. Then comes the emotional turn. Clay looks around. He sees the crowd. He sees the lawmen. He sees the way the town is set up like a trap, narrow streets, closed buildings, too many eyes. he realizes something most violent men refuse to admit. This is not a fair fight. Not because Dodge City is cheating, because Clay is outnumbered by reality. He may be fast, he may be fearless, but fearlessness does not stop bullets. And even if he survives, what does he gain? Another story, another body on the ground, another town that will hate his name. For a man like Clay Allison, backing down does not feel like peace. It feels like weakness. But he also knows something else. A smart man chooses his battles, and this battle would not be chosen by courage, that it would be chosen by chaos. So Clay makes a decision that shocks the people who expected blood. He and his men surrendered their guns. They give them up. At least for the moment, the tension does not vanish right away. It slowly leaks out of the street, like air leaving a tightrope. A few people exhale. A few people laugh nervously. The lawmen do not celebrate. They simply do their job, because that is the point they want to make. In Dodge City, the rule matters more than one man's reputation. Clay Allison does not die in Dodge City. He does not become the hero of a dramatic duel. Instead, he leaves with something else. A lesson. And the lesson is hard. A man can be feared in a dozen towns and still be controlled in the next. One, that realization sits heavy in him, because Clay has lived by one rule for a long time. Never let anyone take your power. But Dodge City shows him a different truth. Power is not only a gun and a holster. Power can be a town standing together. Power can be lawmen who refuse to blink. Power can be the choice to avoid a fight that would destroy everything. Clay rides away from Dodge City alive, but he rides away changed. Not softer. Not suddenly peaceful, but aware that the West is changing. Towns are growing. Rules are spreading. And the old way where a feared man could control a street by reputation alone is beginning to fade. For Clay Allison, this is a warning sign, because if the West is changing, then he will either change with it or be crushed by it later. And the next part of his life will test that, because after Dodge City, Clay tries to settle more. He tries to become just a rancher. He tries to build stability. But the West does not always allow a man to rewrite his story, especially a man whose name already carries danger. After Dodge City, Clay Allison rides away with something he rarely carries. A warning. Not a warning written on paper. Not a warning spoken loudly. A warning felt in the bones. Because Dodge City showed him a new kind of power-organized law. United towns. And rules that did not move just because one man was feared. Clay has spent years living like his reputation is a shield. But now, he understands that a reputation can also be a trap. It can follow him into every doorway. It can turn strangers into enemies before he even speaks. And for the first time in a long time, Clay starts to look at the future differently. Clay Allison is not an ordinary man. He is hard, he is intense. Sometimes he is reckless, but he is also intelligent. He knows when a storm is changing direction, and the West is changing. More settlers are coming. More towns are forming. More lawmen are being hired. More business leaders want stability. They want trade. They want peace. They want growth. And there is no growth in constant gunfire. So Clay begins doing something that surprises people. He begins trying to live like a settled man. A rancher first. A fighter only, if forced. Music.com, but serious. He focuses on land, cattle, and work. Out on the ranch. There are no crowds watching him. There are no saloon whispers. There is only the routine that keeps a man alive. Wake early. Check the herd. Repair fences. Ride. The boundary lines. Make deals. Protect what is his. This kind of life is not glamorous, but it is real. And for Clay, real life may be the only thing strong enough to quiet the wild parts of him. But quiet does not come easily, because Clay carries something inside him. Some people call it trauma. Some call it temper. Some call it something darker. Whatever the label is, the effect is the same. He can be calm for days, and then change in a moment. And when he changes, everyone around him feels it. Still, Clay keeps building. He keeps expanding his ranching work. He keeps moving toward a life that looks respectable on the surface. And then, another shift happens. One that changes how people see him. Clay Allison marries too many people that seems impossible. Because the idea of Clay as a husband does not match the legend of Clay as a feared gunfighter. But real life is often stranger than legend. Marriage gives Clay something the frontier rarely gives violent men: a reason to think twice, a reason to come home, a reason to stop living only for today. That wife does not erase a man's past, but she can change his direction. She can create a new kind of accountability, and for Clay, that matters. Neighbors later describe a man who was still intense, still capable of anger, but also more focused, more stable, more invested in the daily life of ranching. It is not a clean transformation. It is not a movie scene where the bad man becomes good overnight. It is closer to real life than that. It is a hard man trying to be less hard because he finally has something to lose. But the West does not give people clean second chances, especially not men with famous names, because even when Clay is trying to live peacefully, the stories still chase him. A stranger rides in and has heard the legend. A drunk in a saloon wants to test him. A rival sees his ranch success and wants a piece of it. A man with a grudge decides. It is time for payback. The West is full of men who believe violence is a tool, and Clay has spent years proving he understands that tool, so the danger never completely leaves. It only changes shape. There is another problem too. Clay's legend is growing without him. Every story that gets repeated becomes sharper and louder. A fight becomes a duel. A warning becomes a threat. A rumor becomes a fact. And soon, people who have never met Clay feel like they know him. They think they can predict him. They think they can handle him. Or they think they must destroy him before he destroys them. This is what fame looks like on the frontier. Not admiration. Pressure. Clay tries to stay away from trouble, but trouble still finds him, because his past has already taught him a habit. When someone pushes, push back. And even if he is calmer now, he is still Clay Allison. He still does not like disrespect. He still does not like being cornered. He still believes that man must protect his name, because in the West, a damaged name can kill a ranch faster than drought. So he walks a thin line. 1 foot in the future, 1 foot in the past. And for a while, it works. Clay ranches, Clay builds, Clay lives. People still whisper, but he stays mostly out of headlines. He becomes something rare in the Old West, a violent legend who is still alive. A man who survived long enough to age. That alone is unusual, because most gunfighters do not get older. They get buried, but life has a cruel way of choosing endings no one expects. A man can survive battlefields and bar fights. He can survive ambushes and feuds. He can survive enemies who want his name on their belt like a trophy. And then, one ordinary day, something simple can end everything. Clay's story is moving toward that kind of ending, not dramatic, not honorable, not the way legends are supposed to die, but real and sudden and unfair in the years after he settles more deeply into ranch life. Clay spends time moving between ranch work and nearby towns. He hauls supplies, he handles cattle business, he travels on rough roads that do not forgive mistakes. Frontier travel is dangerous even without gunfire. Wagons can flip, horses can stumble, river crossings can turn deadly. A man can be strong and skilled and still lose to the ground. And Clay Allison, of all people, is about to meet that truth. There is something haunting about it, because Clay has lived like violence is his shadow. But in the end, his enemy will not be a man with a gun. It will not be a sheriff. It will not be a rival trying to prove something. It will be a moment, a simple moment of motion and balance, a jolt, a fall, a wheel dot. And that is why his biography still grips people today, because it is not just a story of a gunfighter. It is the story of a man who tries to become more than his worst reputation, a man who tries to settle down, a man who tries to build a life, and then learns the hardest truth of the frontier. You cannot control every ending, not even if you are Clay Allison, the West. Texas road is loud in a simple way. Wooden wheels rattle. Harness straps pull tight. Dust rises and hangs in the air like smoke. Clay Allison is on a wagon, hauling supplies near Pecos, Texas. It is not a glamorous job, but it is a real one. The kind of work that keeps a ranch running, and that is the strange thing at this point in his life. Clay is not chasing gunfights. He is not walking into saloons looking for trouble. He is doing what's settled. Men do. He is trying to live. Clay's reputation still follows him, of course. People still talk about him. People still argue about what he was, killer, protector, or something in between. But on this road, none of that matters. The road does not care who a man used to be. It only cares about balance. It only cares about weight. It only cares about one small mistake. The wagon rolls forward, the sun pressing down like a heavy hand. The horses move steadily, their breath visible in the dust. The driver keeps the pace. Because that is what you do out here. And Clay sits there like a man who has lived through enough to believe he can survive one more day. Then it happens. Not slowly, not with warning. In one sudden moment, the wagon jolts maybe a rock, a rut, a sharp dip in the road. The wheels bounce, the harness snaps tight. The wooden frame shudders. Clay shifts. Just a small movement, but the timing is wrong, and the ground is unforgiving. Clay is thrown from the wagon. It happens so fast that the mind barely understands it. 1 second he is riding. The next second he is falling. And when he hits the dirt, the world turns into noise and impact. The worst part is what comes next. The wagon does not stop. The horses are still moving. The wheels are still turning. And a heavy wheel rolls into him. In the stories people tell later, that wheel runs over his neck. A man who survived battlefields, brawls, and gunfire is ended by something ordinary. A wagon, a wheel, a road. It is not the ending a legend expects. It is not the ending a crowd wants. But it is real life in the Old West, and real life is often crueler than gunfire, because it gives no warning and no choice. For a moment there is confusion. Men shout. Someone grabs the reins. Someone jumps down. Someone runs to Clay. They have seen gunshot wounds before. They have seen broken bones. But this is different. This is sudden and final. Like a door closing. Clay Allison, so feared by so many, now lies still in the dust. And the West does what it always does. It keeps moving. The news travels quickly. Not like modern news, not with headlines and screens. It travels by voices, by riders, by men leaning into saloon counters and saying, "Did you hear what happened?" And almost every person who hears it reacts the same way. First, shock. Then disbelief. Then the same sentence, spoken in different ways. That's how he died. Because everyone expects Clay Allison to die in a gunfight. That is what the legend demands. A man with a violent name is supposed to fall to violence. Not to accident, not to bad luck, not to a wheel on a dusty road. But the frontier does not care about poetic endings. After his death, the stories do not stop. They get louder. And this is where something important happens. Clay Allison becomes more famous after he is gone. Because once a man dies, people can shape him into whatever they want. Some paint him as a ruthless killer who finally got what he deserved. Some paint him as a hard man in a hard land, doing what the frontier required. Some insist he was trying to change, trying to become stable, trying to live like a family man. And maybe all of those things are true in some way, because people are rarely only one thing. But stories like simple categories, hero, villain, monster, legend, the West loves legends most of all. There is another strange truth too. Clay's ending becomes a lesson, a warning carved into memory. It tells people something uncomfortable. A man can win every gunfight and still lose to ordinary life. A man can build fear like armor and still be helpless in one random moment. A man can be the most dangerous person in town and still be defeated by the road. That is why the story sticks. Because it feels like fate, and people love stories that feel like fate. After Clay is buried, the region keeps changing. Towns grow. Trails become roads. More law arrives. More families settle. The wild parts of the frontier begin to shrink. But the legend of Clay Allison remains, sitting in the gap between truth and myth. And that gap is where the Wild West lives. It is where names become larger than facts. It is where a man's worst moments can become his entire biography. And it is where people keep asking the same question. Who was Clay Allison, really? Was he a killer who enjoyed violence? Was he a man damaged by war and trauma? Was he a rancher who wanted peace but could not escape his own temper? Or was he a product of the frontier, a place that pushed men into extremes and then judged them for surviving? The truth is not neat. The truth rarely is. But the story is powerful because it is human. A man tries to outgrow his reputation. A man tries to settle. A man tries to build a life. And then, without drama, without warning, life ends him anyway. And now comes the final twist. Even though Clay is gone, the stories about him keep colliding with other famous names. Wyatt, Earp, Dodge City, Cimarron, the St. James, Hotel, the dinner table showdown. Each one becomes a chapter that people repeat, debate, and exaggerate. Over time, the myth grows so large that it threatens to swallow the man completely. And that leads to the most important part of any true biography, separating what people want to believe from what likely happened. Because if you look closely, Clay Allison's story is not only about gunfights, it is about how legends are manufactured, how fear becomes fame, how small moments become big stories, how the West turns men into myths, especially after they cannot speak for themselves. In part 8, the story changes style. It becomes myth versus reality. Which stories about Clay Allison are strong and supported? Which stories are likely exaggerated? And why did the West need him to be a certain kind of legend? Because once you understand that, you understand not only Clay Allison, you understand the Wild West itself. After Clay Allison dies, his story does not end. It multiplies, it spreads, it changes shape. Because in the Old West, a dead man cannot correct a rumor. And the more famous the man becomes, the more people add to the tale. So part 8 is not only about what Clay did, that it is about what people say he did. It is about the line between history and legend. And that line is thin. Historians and writers agree on one thing. Clay Allison was a real person, a real rancher, and a real violent figure at times. But the movie version of Clay Allison is often louder than the paperwork. So the best way to understand him is to separate the story into two parts. What is strongly supported and what is likely exaggerated. Point 1, MYTH. Clay Allison was the deadliest gunfighter in the West. This is one of the biggest claims. Some versions say he killed a huge number of men. Like a walking storm, it sounds dramatic. It is also the kind of claim that grows fast because it is easy to repeat. But the reality is more complicated. Reality in the Old West. Kill counts are often unreliable. Not every death was recorded clearly. Not every story was written down at the time it happened. And many deaths were claimed by people trying to build a legend. Clay was involved in violence, yes. He killed men, yes. But the exact number is hard to prove with certainty. So when people call him the deadliest, it is usually more about reputation than confirmed records. If a story sounds like a movie poster, it might be a movie story. 2. Myth. He was a pure villain. Some storytellers paint Clay as a monster, a man who enjoyed killing, a man who hurt people for fun, a man with no conscience. That version sells well because it is simple, but real people are rarely simple. Reality, Clay lived in a brutal time and he acted brutally at times, but he also worked, ranching for years, building a life, and later trying to settle down. He had relationships, responsibilities, and long stretches that looked like ordinary frontier life. That does not excuse violence. It just means the truth is not clean. Clay can be wrong, dangerous, and still human. 3. Myth. The dinner table gunfight is perfectly accurate. This is the famous scene people love. Two men at a meal. One reaches. One shoots. A perfect Western moment. Reality. It is hard to confirm every detail exactly as told. Old West stories are often true in spirit, but messy in detail. What matters is why the story survives. It matches what people believed about Clay. They believed he stayed calm under threat. They believed he could read danger quickly. And they believed he could win sudden moments. So the dinner table story becomes a symbol. Even if the scene has been polished by retelling, the West did not just report stories. It performed them. For myth, Clay Allison faced down Wyatt Earp in a dramatic showdown. This is another popular claim. It connects Clay to a bigger legend. Wyatt Earp hand gives the story instant fame. Two famous names, one street, one showdown. But here is what usually happens with stories like this. They get simplified. They get hero and villain framing. They get a clean ending. reality, even when an incident in Dodge City is mentioned. The Big Duel version is often disputed. Many accounts suggest it was less like a movie and more like a tense land order situation, where Clay and his men were pressured into giving up weapons. That may sound less dramatic, but it is actually more realistic. Real power is often not one man staring down another. Real power can be a town deciding, together, not here. 5 myth. Clay was insane, so everything he did was madness. This is a common label used to explain violent behavior quickly. Insane becomes a shortcut word, but shortcut words can be misleading. Reality. Clay was described by some sources as emotionally unstable, and there were claims of a head injury and war-related issues. But it is hard to diagnose someone properly from a distance, especially in the 1800s. What can be said in simple terms is this: Clay seemed to have extreme reactions. He could be calm, then suddenly dangerous. He drank heavily at times, and stress seemed to trigger him. That does not make him a cartoon character. It makes him a man who may have carried damage inside him. The frontier did not know how to treat. Point 6. Myth. He died in a blaze of glory. People expect that kind of ending for a gunfighter. They want a final duel. They want a heroic last stand. They want a dramatic last line. Reality. Clay's death is remembered as an accident thrown from a wagon and fatally injured. And that may be the most real part of his entire story, because the West was full of random death: a slip, a fall, a horse, a wheel, a river crossing. A man could survive bullets and still lose to the road. That ending is not glamorous, but it is honest, and maybe that is why it sticks. So who was he, really? Clay Allison becomes famous for the same reason many frontier figures become famous: because he lived at the edge of control. He was not fully outlawed, not fully lawman, not fully hero, not fully villain. He was a rancher with violence in his history. A man with a temper, a man shaped by war and frontier pressure, and a man whose story grew bigger than him after he died. Here is the important lesson: the Wild West is not only a place, it is a storytelling machine. It takes real men and turns them into symbols. Clay Allison became a symbol of fear, but he also became a symbol of something deeper: the idea that a man can try to change and still be trapped by what people believe about him. A reputation is a ghost. It walks ahead of you, and it follows after you. In the next part, part 9, the story returns to the human Clay again. Not the myth, not the rumor. The man trying to build stability, brand, ranch, marriage, and the struggle to stay out of trouble in a world that remembers everything. Because the final question is not how many did he kill. The final question is, did Clay Allison ever truly escape the man the West said he was? After all the whispers, all the fear, and all the violent stories, Clay Allison does something that almost feels impossible. He tries to live a normal life. Not normal, like a city man. Normal like a frontier rancher: work, land, cattle, family. And for a while, that life starts to fit him. Not perfectly, but enough to matter. By this stage, Clay has already seen what reputation can do. He has seen crowds gather. He has seen towns tighten up around him. He has felt the pressure of being watched. He understands that the Wild West is changing, and that he cannot survive forever as a man who lives by conflict. So he leans into ranching. He leans into routine. He leans into building a future that does not depend on fear. One important sign of this shift is his brand. Clay registers a cattle brand in Texas, known as Ace. To some people, a brand is just a mark on an animal. But to ranchers, a brand is identity. It is a statement that says, this is mine. I built this. I will protect it. Brands are pride. Brands are business. Brands are survival. And Clay wants something that belongs to him in a way no saloon story ever could. Then comes an even bigger shift. Clay marries. He marries a woman named Dora. This matters because marriage on the frontier is not a small thing. It is not just romance. It is commitment under hard conditions. It is choosing a home when the world is full of reasons to keep moving. It is choosing responsibility when a man is used to answering only to himself. 4. A figure like Clay Allison. Marriage is a loud signal. It tells people he is trying to settle. It tells people he is trying to become stable. It tells people he is trying to be more than his reputation. And neighbors later speak of a side of Clay that surprises many listeners. Man who can be respectful, a man who can be helpful, a man who can be calm for long stretches, not the wild gunfighter in the loudest stories, but a working rancher who wants to live. However, the story is not that simple, because Clay cannot erase his past, and the frontier never forgets. Even when Clay is living as a rancher, trouble is still part of the environment. It may not be his first choice anymore, but it is still close. Cattle can be stolen, land can be disputed, deals can go bad. Men can show up angry, drunk, or jealous. And the West has a special kind of danger, the kind that comes from pride. A man with pride will risk everything for an insult. A man with pride will start a fight. He cannot afford. And pride is something Clay has never lacked. So even in his settled period, people still feel careful around him. They still watch him closely. They still measure their words, because they know what Clay can become when pushed too hard. There is also the problem of other men. The men who want fame. The men who want to test a legend. These men are like moths around a lamp. They circle what is bright and dangerous. They believe that if they can beat Clay Allison, if they can embarrass him or injure him or kill him, they will steal the power of his name. That is how reputation works. It can protect you, but it can also paint a target on your back. Clay's name is a target, and he knows it. So, he lives carefully. Not always peacefully, but carefully. This is where Clay becomes more human in the story, because it is easy to imagine him as only a gunfighter. But a gunfighter is still a person who wakes up tired. A person who feels fear, but hides it. A person who wants safety, but cannot fully trust it. A person who wants to be loved, but worries he is too rough to be. Clay is older now. Not old by modern standards, but older for the frontier. He has survived longer than many violent men survive. That survival forces him to think, because a man cannot live through that much and remain exactly the same. He begins to understand something quiet and painful. A man's biggest enemy is not always another man. Sometimes the biggest enemy is the life he has built around himself. Because if a man becomes famous for violence, violence keeps knocking on his door, even if he stops inviting it. Clay's days become a mix of work and travel. He hauls supplies. He rides long distances. He moves between ranch and town, because a rancher still needs tools, food, and business connections. And this travel is where fate starts positioning the final chapter, because frontier travel is dangerous, not only from bandits or gunmen, from the land itself. From the roads, from the wagons, from the small mistakes that become deadly. Most people think death arrives like a gunshot, but on the frontier, death often arrives like an accident, a slip, a fall, a kick, a wheel. Clay's life is moving toward that type of ending, and it creates a strange emotional tension, because if Clay is truly trying to change, then his ending feels unfair. It feels like the world refusing to give him time. It feels like life saying, you do not control the closing scene. But if a viewer believes Clay was only a violent man, then the ending feels like irony, like fate making a point. Either way, the ending carries weight, because it does not match what the legend should be. And that is why his biography stays interesting. It is not a clean morality story. It is not bad man dies in duel. It is not good man wins. It is something more uncomfortable. A man tries to live. A man tries to settle. A man tries to become something else, and then the road ends him anyway. The road near Pecos feels ordinary. That is the strange part. It is not a battlefield. It is not a saloon. It is not a street filled with armed men staring each other down. It is just a rough West Texas road, with dust in the air and sun pressing down like a heavy hand. Clay Allison is on a wagon again, doing the kind of work that keeps a ranch alive. Supplies, travel, routine. A normal day for a rancher, and for a man like Clay, normal is something he has spent years trying to hold on to. Clay's life, when it is looked at from a distance, feels like two stories at once. One story is loud, gunfights, threats, rumors, men who die. a name that makes strangers nervous. That is the story people love to repeat. But the other story is quieter. The ranch work, the building, the trying to settle down, the moments where he is not a legend, not a monster, not a headline, just a man with a past that follows him, a man who has to wake up and live anyway. By the time Clay reaches this final chapter, he is not chasing fame. He is not trying to be the most feared man in the West. He has already learned that fame can be a trap. He has already seen that towns are changing. He has already felt the weight of being watched. So he does what many men do. When they grow older, he tries to make life smaller and safer. He tries to focus on what he can control. Land, cattle, home, family. But the frontier is not a place where control is guaranteed. Out there, life can turn in 1 second. A horse can stumble. A river can rise. A wagon can hit a rut. And when heavy wheels are moving, the smallest mistake can become fatal. This is what happens to Clay Allison. On that road, the wagon jolts. There is a sudden shift. A moment where the world tilts the wrong way, and Clay is thrown. It is fast, too fast. There is no time for bravery, no time for pride, no time for a final speech. Only impact, only dust, only the cruel weight of a moving wagon that does not stop in time. That is how Clay Allison dies. Not in a famous duel, not with a crowd cheering, not with a sheriff finally getting him. He dies in an accident, a simple frontier accident, and that ending is the reason many people remember him, because it feels shocking, because it feels unfair, because it feels like the West itself making a point. A man can survive violence for years and still lose to ordinary life. When people hear the news, the first reaction is disbelief, not because they think Clay is immortal, but because the ending does not match the legend. Legends are supposed to end in fire. Legends are supposed to end with gun smoke in the air. Legends are supposed to end the way stories end. But this story ends the way real life often ends, suddenly, quietly, without permission. And once Clay is gone, something else happens. The stories grow even bigger, because a living man can defend his name. A dead man cannot. So people take Clay Allison and shape him into whatever they need. Some people turn him into a warning. They say he was evil. They say he was unstable. They say he was a killer who finally met justice. Other people soften him. They say he was brave. They say he was misunderstood. They say he was a product of war and a harsh frontier. They say he tried to change, and both sides find pieces of truth that support their view. Because Clay was not simple. He was not only one thing, he was a mix, a rancher and a fighter. A man who could work hard and still explode. A man who could build a life and still carry the storm inside him. This is the real resolution of Clay Allison's story. He becomes a mirror. People look at him and see what they already believe about the Wild West. If they believe the West was only violence, Clay becomes proof. If they believe the West was survival, Clay becomes proof. If they believe men can change, Clay becomes hope. If they believe men cannot change, Clay becomes a warning. And that is why his biography stays alive, because it is not only about Clay, it is about how people become legends, and what legends do to the truth. In the end, Clay Allison's life teaches 3 hard lessons. First, reputation is powerful. It can protect a man, it can open doors, it can keep enemies away, but it can also paint a target on his back. Second, violence has a cost. Even if a man survives it, it changes him. It changes how others treat him, and it changes what kind of life he is allowed to live. Third, no one controls the ending. Not the toughest man, not the fastest gun, not the most feared name. Life can end a legend with a wagon wheel. So why is Clay Allison still famous? Because he represents the Wild West at its most honest. Not the polished movie version, the real version. A harsh land where men could reinvent themselves, but not fully escape themselves. A place where courage and cruelty lived side by side. A place where people became myths while they were still breathing. And a place where fate did not care who was feared. Clay Allison is gone, but the question remains, was he a ruthless killer? Was he a damaged man shaped by war and frontier pressure? Was he a rancher who tried to settle down and become better? Or was he all of these things at different times? Maybe that is the most human answer. Because most people are not one thing forever. Most people are a story still, being written until it suddenly ends. If the viewer enjoyed this true Wild West biography series, they should subscribe for more real-life outlaw and gunfighter stories. And they should comment below. Villain or survivor, which word fits Clay Allison best, and why?